Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here coming to you with the next update in 2021 Canadian election forecast. Wow. So just as a note, for all of these forecasts, this is not forecast for September 20th. This is a forecast if the election was today, because there's still 4 weeks left in the campaign. The debates still haven't happened. A lot could change. I think at this point, the 1 week mark, the things we can say for certain, this is a competitive election. Liberals, conservatives at home, you should make sure you vote. This will matter. NDP supporters and blocks, you too, you could easily gain or lose a bunch of seats this election. And Greens, for sure, you're polling real bad, so you should vote if you want your party to win. And if you don't vote, don't complain. Mic drop. Crazy. Well, anyways, so let's go over seat changes. So, Conservatives pick up 2 seats in BC from the Liberals. I don't know which ones off the top of my head because I did not look because I do not have a lot of time. So I'm sure my regular viewers would be aware I'm a busy person, or I guess I'm not a full-time YouTuber, so I don't have the time to commit 100% to this. And there's so many polls right now, it's almost a full-time job keeping this up to date. This is kind of insane. Great data. I feel like it's going to be very confident in my model come election day, or well, the day before election day when I make my final projection. But it takes a lot of time. So a lot of the nice to haves are going to be sporadic. But that's what it is. In Ontario, Liberals pick up a seat from NDP, and in Quebec, NDP pick up 2 seats from the Bloc, and Conservatives pick up 2 seats from the Bloc. For the Conservatives, I believe it's it's the between Chicomuti and Beauport, if you know what I mean, Quebecers, and 12 Rivières. So that's really where we got with the seat changes here. It definitely closes it a bit. The Liberals are now 8 seats away from the majority. Conservatives are, I guess, technically 4 seats closer to winning, but 4 seats closer doesn't really matter. It's kind of an irrelevant number. NDP's kind of waffling about. Actually, if we switch here and we go to this one now, graphing seat distribution projection, the colors are a bit wonky. I'm working on it. Don't worry about it. So, NDP have started at like 26, and they're just kind of like hovering about. They don't seem to be having much momentum or unmomentum. Well, the Conservatives quickly pushed up to 22, 122. But the last 3 days, they have kind of stagnated at 122. Obviously, we still have 28 days in the election, so there's plenty of time for them to push forward, but it's definitely at a status quo. We're kind of in an equilibrium moment here. Now, this is a dumb thing to do because we're in an election, so a lot can happen. But I think barring any major promises, I would expect that these numbers here, as of this row, might still hold pretty strongly to the debates. The only thing that might change this is if someone unveils a big, bold policy decision. But so far, we're a week in and no one's really unveiled anything exciting. I'm going to rephrase this. People, like all the parties, have a lot of their policies out or what they're going to do, but like nothing campaign defining. That makes sense. So there's not. I'm thinking that this might not move that much. Now, I will note, as I said before, it'll be easier to explain on this screen. So these numbers here are what I'm projecting is the most likely. All models like this are up to a certain degree probabilistic. I don't put margins of errors or percent chances of doing things like this. I'm not against actually margin of errors per se, but the percent chance of this outcome I disagree with on a fundamental basis. Because you don't repeat elections. The vote doesn't happen 8 times. It doesn't happen 20 times. It doesn't happen 100 times. It's kind of weird to say that, but either or. So percent chances don't mean anything. They only mean something if an event is repeated. If you roll a bunch of dice, the percent chance matters, but on an individual roll, anything can happen, if that makes sense. And in an election, it's kind of like a weighted set of dice because there's one party that definitely has momentum. There's not really been any election where on election day the outcome was completely unexpected. Like the Nova Scotia election, it just happened last week, Tuesday. It was an upset, but it wasn't entirely unexpected. Like the Progressive Conservatives in Nova Scotia had a non-zero chance of winning, and everyone knew that. It would have been a complete surprise if the NDP won, because they were so far down in the poll. So far down in the polls compared to the Progressive Conservatives or the Liberal Party, that a win from the NDP would have been shocking in the provincial election. But either the PCs or the Liberals winning wouldn't have been a surprise. Maybe a bit of an upset. Oh, the Progressive Conservatives won, but no one would be like, wow, how did that happen? They'd just be like, oh, okay, makes sense. Especially if you look at the last 2 polls where the result was within margin of error, so that's even more unsurprising. But all this to say, there is some room for each party. So in Ontario, the Liberals don't really have much more room to grow. They could theoretically pick up, I believe it's in the realm of like 5, maybe 6 seats from the Conservatives. 7 if they're really lucky. NDP could easily pick up to 30 seats if they do well, mostly from the Liberals. I wouldn't even be surprised if they got more, but they have room to grow. They have a lot of room to grow in urban Toronto and a lot of the more industrial parts of the province, especially like the north. They have room to grow. Conservatives can easily pick up 40. Is it likely? No, but it's possible. Like these are the possible seat options. I think the realistic outcome, like for the best case scenario for the Conservatives right now, we start in BC, or pretty much in it. This is really efficient Conservative voting here in BC. They're only, if we go back here, they're only projected to be about 35% of the vote. So this is extremely efficient voting. At 35% support, you can't really expect them to win many more seats here. Alberta, they could easily sweep Alberta. Saskatchewan, they could easily sweep Saskatchewan. Manitoba, they could pick up 1. At this current level of support, that's 5. Ontario, with the current levels of support, if they get lucky, they can probably pick up 8. They can pick up the Yukon. So that puts us what? 5, 14. The Conservatives are pretty saturated in Quebec now. There's only like 2 ridings left that, at their current level of support, they even have a non-zero chance of winning. So they could get another 2 there. Let's say really best case scenario. No, I'm going to say 1, because the second one, John Queer is the one that they're competitive in. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. I'm sorry, French people. The other one is the riding to the left of that one, if you know what I'm talking about. I can't think of its name. That one they have like, I think 338 has like 1% chance or something. Like it's not impossible, but I'm not going to consider it in this case. So they could pick up 1 there. So let's put it to 15. Mind you, this is up until now it's been all from Liberals, so good for them. That actually matters. They took 27 seats from the Bloc, they still lose. They took 27 seats from the Liberals, they form government now. Atlantic Canada, though, this is where the Conservatives could eke out a surprise win. They could easily pick up 2 in New Brunswick, maybe 2 in PEI. They could easily pick up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. I know, I can't even count my own province. 5 in PEI. Sorry, Nova Scotia. And 3 in Newfoundland. This is aggressive, but this is potential on the table. Like this looks pretty red, But the thing is, there's a bunch of incoherence in the polls right now. Sort of lesser degree in Ontario, where there's a couple polls, like Main Street, for example, keeps polling the Conservatives leading in on Atlantic Canada for the last couple polls, and a couple others had it close, and a couple others have Liberals in a decisive lead. So if we're talking about Main Street being a lot closer to reality in that hypothetical world, they could easily pick up the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 seats in Atlantic Canada. If it's closer to the average of the two groups, it's probably more like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 seats. So I'm going to go with 5 here, but I do want to note the Conservatives do have a potential to win a lot of seats in Atlantic Canada. And I wouldn't, if you're obviously like, the rest of Canada really should not write off Atlantic Canada as a default Liberal area. I don't think it is, as a Atlantic Canadian, as a Nova Scotian. I think there's been a case where the last 2 elections it's been extremely Liberal, but that doesn't mean it's always like that. It's not like Alberta's like pretty much always conservative for the last 50 years. And well, prior to that, there was also the Social Credit Party, which is also, I would say, was a right-wing party. So even then, it was still very right-wing. Here in Eastern Canada, it's a lot, or Atlantic Canada, it's a lot more. I think Liberals have an advantage, but it's very competitive for a good conservative candidate who tries. So we'll see. Well, let's say 5. So that puts us to what, 20? Mostly from the Liberals. So that would give the Conservatives a small minority. Small, I think. Actually, I think they might just give it a Liberal minority. I don't want to do the math, but you see the idea. So they like, it's possible, but it's very difficult. A Conservative minority happening is because the NDP have eaten seats. They could eat seats in BC. They could eat seats in Ontario. They could even pick up a seat. Halifax proper could go NDP. St. John South probably could go NDP. Pretty much nothing in Newfoundland or New Brunswick or PEI. Maybe a seat in Saskatchewan. Potentially one of the Liberal seats in Saskatchewan. They could potentially pick up a seat in Alberta. But if we're talking about a Conservative best case scenario, then it would be NDP picking up some seats from the Liberals, and then you could see a Conservative minority win. Conservative majority win is not in the cards at all. The little minority option, as here, 163, pretty safe bet. Low majority is possible, but it's looking hard. I don't really know where the Liberals could pick up a lot of seats. Like, they could pick up 2, aggressively 5 in BC, but I don't really see them picking up any more in Alberta, any more in Saskatchewan, any more in Manitoba. Maybe Quebec, but it doesn't seem to be in the cards. They're not polling that amazingly in Quebec. I mean, right now, actually, if we go back here, they're polling about how they did in 2019. That's not anything worth talking about. So, little majority is possible. I think it's unlikely. I actually think it's possibly more unlikely than a Conservative victory. Because it looks like the Conservatives have some momentum behind them. You can easily see this with this graph here. This is kind of hard to see, so we'll go on the individual party graphs. So this is just graphing updates since the election. I switched to daily now from twice or by every 2 days. So there's some gaps here. But the Conservatives are definitely gaining ground right now in the polling aggregate. How long they're going to be gaining ground, hard to say. But they're definitely gaining ground. 0.84 is very strong, and that slope is pretty large. Now, mind you, the x-axis is a weird number because the way Excel handles days is it's like the number of days since, like, I think it's September or January 1st, 1970. So this number, it doesn't mean, look at this in a grain of salt. The equation, I should say. Like, that slope doesn't really mean much, but the R squared does. So they're definitely gaining ground. Block's definitely losing ground, and this could be where the Liberals could pull out a majority, is if the Bloc keeps losing ground and it doesn't keep going at the Conservatives, if the Liberals can capitalize on the Bloc falling, that could be game. And by game, I mean that could be their majority. But what I suspect is happening isn't that the Bloc is falling apart. I think it is the right wing of the Bloc is being like, we should just vote for a right-wing party. Like a solidly right-wing party. Like the Bloc is kind of a weird party. I wouldn't really call it left or right. It's like statist center. Statist in the sense that it thinks the state should do things, not statist as in it's like pro-Canada, if that makes sense. So keep that in mind. I think the right wing is deserting it and going to the Conservatives. I think that's where you can look here. They're polling at 18.2 now. August 8th, they were polled at 16.9. The Conservatives in Quebec, so that's 1.3 percentage point gain, as the Bloc has lost 2.9. So a lot of it is going to the Conservatives, and some seem to be going to the NDP and other parties, like People's Party and stuff. So I think that is the main driving thing for the Bloc losing ground. I think, as you see here, the last two updates, I think they might have stabilized, and it was just a drop about 0.7 or so nationally. We'll see. Other than this, these two starting points, which were a bit of anomalous, Greens are definitely on a down cycle. They could possibly lose all of their seats. Unlikely. I think Elizabeth May is probably going to win re-election. But it's not looking good for the Greens. Their decision to basically try to overthrow the party establishment of the Greens, trying to overthrow Paul, was a disaster. And they have not had time to recover from it. People's Party here, gaining ground steadily. Doing pretty good, actually. They're being polled at 2.4. It's like 50% higher than last election. So I wouldn't be surprised, especially if their numbers keep going up in Quebec, because they seem to be gaining some ground. It's a maybe it's a bit of a wait. That's New Brunswick. That's Nova Scotia. I'm being dumb. Yeah, they're definitely gaining some ground in Quebec here, as you can see. But it remains to be seen where it is. It could very well be that is in Maxime Bernier's riding, in which case we could see him become member of parliament. Or it could be some other places, like there's some relatively big names, like for a Canadian YouTuber, for example, Viva Fry is running in Quebec City. Not Quebec City, sorry. Montreal, Notre Dame de Glace. He could potentially be getting a lot of this People's Party support. He's a big name, especially in the community. Well, I mean, relatively speaking. I mean, most candidates are names in the community. But hard to say. Hard to say where it is until the election happens. So I guess the big asterisk I have with the People's Party here is I am being conservative with my model, and I am kind of clamping down what they should be at. Partially because they did a lot worse in their polling in the last election. Partially because I think there's going to be a lot of strategic voting of people who say they're going to vote PPC, but they're going to vote conservative anyways. And there's a lot of reasons why you might do that, to like try to pressure Aaron O'Toole to adopt more People's Party positions, but that's neither here nor there. Though it could be the case that support is real and it does happen, in which case I could have a big polling miss. There could be People's Party seats that I've missed. Boyce could easily go Maxime Bernier. There could be some pickups in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, because it's roughly, like, this could easily be 5% here. Now, 5% isn't a lot, but if 5%'s in a single like in a concentrated area, that could easily be a win. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of cards at play here. This is a competitive election. I will stress this, like, for the rest of the election. This election is competitive. Anyone watching this, don't go home and think your vote doesn't matter. Your vote does matter. Do not let headline polls or media pundits or party members tell you that the election's a foregone conclusion. Anyone could win. All right, okay, I'm going to rephrase this. Either the Conservatives or the Liberals could win. I mean, obviously, I don't think the NDP could win. Anyone who's watched this channel enough times know I don't have a very good opinion of Singh as a leader. But that's what it is. So don't go home and think your vote doesn't matter. Your vote does matter. Otherwise, I hope you all had a good video or enjoyed the video. If you liked it, please press like, share it, comment below what you think of the projection, what you think of the model. If you think I'm missing anything, or if there's any events that you think might be that might cause a future shift going forward, like for example, in Atlantic Canada, I think there is a bit of a polling mismatch, which we saw in Nova Scotia. I think a lot of the lobster fishermen and like their friends, family, and other types of fishermen are probably going, particularly Nova Scotia, possibly spilling over to Newfoundland or New Brunswick and in PEI, could easily desert the Liberals and end up voting for the Conservatives because of the abject failure the Liberal government had in dealing with the fisheries crisis last year, which some of you in the rest of the country might have heard of as after it got bad, where a bunch of lobster fishermen were getting the TLDR of that. I don't want to cover the whole details because you can look it up yourself easily, but the long story short of that is a bunch of lobster fishermen were upset that local indigenous groups, the Mi'kmaq, were, not all of them, I should know, not all Mi'kmaq, but some Mi'kmaq were lobster fishing out of season in the spawning season for lobsters, and there was concerns that they were going to damage the health of the lobster fishing stock. What wrinkles this is the Mi'kmaq have a treaty right to a moderate livelihood from fishing. I think that's how the treaty's worded, which is vague. The Supreme Court has ruled that the federal government can define what that means, but they haven't. And a bunch of lobster fishermen were protesting and were upset that they were fishing out of season and they wanted something done about it. And Trudeau and the fisheries minister and the local MPs, Liberal MPs, ignored it, even though the fisheries minister is from a lobster fishing area. I mean, herself she's not from a lobster fishing community, but there's a lot of lobster fishing on the South Shore. Most of the chaos was around the Bay of Fundy, but it's kind of her responsibility, and she's from Nova Scotia, and she did nothing. And Trudeau did nothing. And then when they got in, after it got violent, they called the lobster fishermen racist because they had a reasonable concern. I don't condone it getting violent. I think that was dumb. But that's what happens when you ignore people when they have legitimate concerns. They end up getting violent. It's always the wrong choice, but it happens. And that's the truth of the matter. So I think that is something that's being missed in the polls. So if you have anything like that you think I might be missing, or you think people in general are missing, please share below. I'm really interested in that kind of stuff. I spend way too many hours every week doing this, so I'm always looking for more information that might make my model better, because I really want to get a good projection on this. I want to beat all of my rivals. By my rivals, I mean my friendly competitors in the election forecast business. So, otherwise, hope you all have a good evening.